Welcome to Speak Chronicles. This is a journey of getting to know horses outside the box. Join us as we see horses from their perspective as a prey animal with the same social needs as us. I'm Laura Wilsie, co-creator of Speak, and I'm here today with my co-host PJ Rossi, who is one of our Speak educators, practitioners, and cohorts on this mission with Speak. The members of Speak are on a journey to educate horse enthusiasts about horses based on repeatable, learnable, and teachable observation skills and body language mechanics. Welcome, PJ. Thanks for being with me today.
Thanks, Laura. It's such an honor to be here and share out some of my experiences with the Horse Speak group.
Awesome. And I was thinking about this podcast as we take this journey together. And one of the things that I was thinking about as a goal for this podcast is to help empower our listeners and for them to know that they are enough, that we're not going to be just sitting here talking about how good we are with horses and all the cool stuff. Yes, we're going to share some stories and talk about some of our clients that we've worked with, but this is about educating people to really understand horses maybe from a different perspective than they previously know. So I'm excited about this journey because I'm not only is Horse Speak like my life every day, all day, it is just, I'm so passionate about this and to really help people who may have a really challenging horse to be able to get on the other side. So in this episode today, we're going to be meeting PJ and I, and we're also going to introduce someone who is not here with us, but the reason why we're here is Sharon Wilsie. And so then we're also going to just talk a little bit about what Horse Speak is, because there's a lot of different thoughts about just even that title Horse Speak. So we're going to get into some of those details. So PJ, if you don't mind, if you could just tell our listeners here a little about yourself.
Absolutely. I think, background whenever we start talking about our journey with horses, it begins for most of us a little bit farther back than we initially realize. I was telling someone the other day that my very first memory as a child was sitting on the back of a horse, sitting in the front part of the saddle in front of my dad and looking down through a bay horse's ears. And I know from the dates of when we visited family for that to have happened that I was just 2 years old. So maybe a little bit over, it might have been like the month after I turned 2. So my very first memory is being on the back of a horse. And I can remember to this day the visual of what that horse looked like and the perspective from which I was sitting. So that's pretty fascinating. And I think for a lot of us who are still, no matter what age we are right now, still on a journey with horses, we had something that just said, okay, that's it. It resonated, horse crazy kids or an appreciation for their character, demeanor, whatever that is. There's something in our history that we were hooked pretty quickly from one event. Um, During my childhood, I was fortunate enough to have a wonderful, nurturing mare. And growing up in rural Kentucky, my childhood experiences on my horse were riding lead rope and halter, bareback, no helmet, no shoes, shorts, swimming through the pond, being gone for hours at a time, just riding, she and I, through the woods. My mother didn't know where the heck we were. And in those days, maybe it didn't matter so much. We did
Yeah,
things
as long
differently.
as you're home by dinner.
As long as you're home by dinner. And when the horse and I got hungry, we went home. So, I had a great experience understanding what that communication and connection feels like. I didn't know any fine body language at that time, but the positives were also I hadn't learned how someone else thought I should be with my horse. I was just with my horse. And so um, I kind of fast forward into my early adulthood. I went to college to become a veterinarian, and life changed a little bit. And I ended up moving out of that area and meeting my future husband, who was a veterinarian. So went a little bit on a slightly parallel journey and managed our veterinary practice. We had a um, small animal referral veterinary practice just north of Boston. We specialized in ultrasound and cardiology, internal medicine, and endoscopy CT on small animals. So was busy with my children and running, managing our business, and was away from horses for about 25 years. And when my youngest went to college, the story that is, and the story I tell is that I was sitting on the sofa with my husband and I said, I'm really not ready to give up this mother nurturing aspect of I don't want to be finished with this role yet. And I think I want to get a horse. And he said, okay, because he thought that would be less expensive than raising a child and going to college and all that stuff. Little did he know, right? As most of us horse people know, um, it is a little bit expensive to do the horse training because we basically send them to college at times too. Um, so I got my next horse in my life after 25 years, a lovely little Rocky Mountain mare named Nike, and her motto in life is just do it. Let's just do it. And she talks very fast. She had a lot of questions for me, and being a being a seeker and having spent time in our vet practice, really getting to know our animal patients as well as our human patients, I understood that she was trying to say things to me that I didn't know what those were. And
Mm.
we'd go out to the runaround arena outside the barn where she was being boarded and unhook her lead rope. And she would walk away from me for about 6 steps, turn her hip toward me, and turn around and look at me. So in my humanness, I thought, well, she's leaving me. We just had such a nice walk from the barn to the arena. Why is she now walking away from me? And we've kind of been taught by humans, of course, to be mindful of that rear end, but she was turning it toward me in a very non-threatening feeling way. And so I began to get really curious about what is going on here, because obviously she's trying to let me know something of the way she's feeling or something that she wants, and I don't know what this is. So I went seeking. Um, I'm a reader and a little bit of a researcher, and had read, a lot of the evolution of natural horsemanship, which I kind of missed in that 25 years of not being with horses, and understanding that there was just something still missing. Read a lot of books. There were some I took some information from, and some I just kind of set aside, saying this philosophy doesn't resonate with me. And the piece that was still missing was found when I dug a little bit deeper and found Horse Speak on Amazon and said, this sounds like what I might be looking for. And from the moment I read the book, and living in the New England area, I was fortunate enough to be close enough to Sharon and Laura to start to attend some horse speed clinics. And after that first one, I was pretty much hooked and became a horse speed groupie and did pretty much every clinic you guys offered from 2017 on. Still here,
Yes.
changing my roles a little
Yeah.
bit from student to becoming one of your education team. But from that very first clinic where I learned about greeting protocol and safety and protection and what's really important to horses and what their communication of their nonverbal body language looks like, I went home that evening after the clinic. My little gal was on cross ties, and I remembered greeting, and she gave me a lovely turn away of her cheek and neck. And just the inside of me kind of went back to being 6 years old, and I went, oh, this really works. It works. It's a thing. And she did it. She knows this. And I remember moving back to her hind end and giving her protection messages. I was standing at her left hip, and she looked back at me with the most interesting look on her face. And her expression just said to me, okay, so you learned a couple of words, but your accent really stinks. We're going to have to work. And so we did. We began just playing with some of the protocols, and I was mindful to pause and ask her what she thought about this, certain body language that I was trying to emulate. And everything's just grown from there. We have such a nice, tight friend relationship, she and I, and it's grown so much from that very first moment of the greeting, and greeting in her language and not expecting her to kind of fill in the holes that we have in greeting her like a human would, or moreover, like we often pat our dog. This is how people come
Mm,
to horses often, is how we are with our dog. And some of those things do overlay and overlap, but they are different species and they do have slightly different body languages and reasons for those body language sometimes. So um, that's kind of my big background and my beginning, and fast forward into my journey of horse speak.
beautiful. Well, thank you for that, PJ. And I love listening to your story every time. This like how just your childhood and then what you did professionally and then, finding us in horse speak. It's just so cool to keep just hearing the different actually versions that you have in within that. So the other thing I wanted to mention, because I really enjoyed how you brought in, dogs just briefly. And the one thing that I think that we have been able to do with our dogs that's a lot different than what we seem to be with our horses is we live with our dogs and we live with them in the house. So then we have been able to develop a way with them because we live with them day in, day out. We've been able to learn some of their signals and their different postures and things. And it's different when we look at horses because we're not out there with them every day, all day. And some of us, can be graced with them being in our backyard, or we might have to go and visit them in a boarding stable. So
Right.
then there's this different, we're going to get into some of these details and talk about, how to have the highest impact for the time that you do get to spend with your horse. And learning their nonverbal language is a great way to just in minutes be able to have such a beautiful, deep connection. Just like you were talking about going back and seeing Nike and being like, she felt something different. And I'm sure you felt a little bit different too in the connection.
Yeah, that there was a more understood connection. We understood each other better from that point. Everything just felt like it started to click.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Because then you're also being able to have purpose. Be like, I'm going to say hello to you. And I know, and again, getting into different topics during this, like why there is a greeting and why space is so important and what is a positive space gesture by them, which you did mention her bringing her cheek away. So it's really neat. I love just the layers that we are going to be helping our listeners to notice these little nuances that they give us and that we can interpret those with real meaning and not just, oh yeah, they just move their head to the side.
Yeah, and I think something that begins to happen when we can create a better system of communication, because we are learning, observing, and emulating their nonverbal body language, is that when we get something reciprocated back from the horse, whether it's that moving the cheek away to talk about the safety of space between the two beings, because safety is one of the first foremost important thing to a horse. When we start to see actions that are in response to what we are doing or how we are being from the horse's perspective, it incites joy within us. There's often a surprise, like we can't believe that that actually just happened. And my husband likes to joke sometimes, and he jokingly calls me Dr. Doolittle, and I say, "No, no, it's not that. It's absolutely not that. It is, um, we're really seeing. We're not just looking at the horse.
Yeah.
We start to see, um, the things that are important to them, and when that happens, it really creates such a positive feel inside us,
Mm,
which helps the horse to also want to be with us more,
right.
and check in with us and greet us. So it snowballs from that. I think that really the first greeting connection they have with a horse. I've heard several people say, I really have been with horses for a long time, and I never looked at it from this perspective, that they are actually trying to communicate with me. I always thought that, when the horse brings his muzzle into me. I thought he's just kind of getting in my space. And if you watch horses in even a 2 horse herd or a 20 horse herd, it doesn't
Hmm.
matter. When there's a disconnect and then they reconnect, they greet or recheck in with their muzzles, and they do the same things to us. We're just not seeing it for what it is.
Yeah.
So through the journey of learning horse speak, understanding equine's nonverbal language system, we start to see things a little bit differently, and it feels really good to us, and it becomes more exciting to be with them.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'm gonna just I want to keep going actually with this topic that we're talking about, but to circle back around really quickly, I'm gonna introduce myself. Again, I'm Laura Wilsie, and I from childhood I remember I had a similar experience being a very small individual. I plunked on the back of a horse with my brother actually, and then the adults were holding us on. I have a Polaroid of one that experience, um, and my experience with horses was a little bit different because from that moment that was so blissful as a very small child that my parents and grandparents were like, the horses are dangerous, don't go in the pen with them. And I'm like, okay. So I had a mare who I also spent time with over the stall door, and her name was Lady. And it was a beautiful, I just felt really connected with her, actually, even just over the stall. And as time went on, I remember also going to SeaWorld and watching the professionals work with the whales and the dolphins and the sea lions. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to work with animals and have them do cool tricks. And so that was just like, and I know that was a huge inspiration internally for me. And as I got a little bit older, my grandparents actually had the horses at home and then got into thoroughbred racing. And what I remember from that experience was I just felt a lot of stress. I felt stress from the horses being in boxes all day and basically going out and running their exercise in the morning and then going back. It was just all horses' heads were very high. And I just was like, wow, I'm around the horses. But as from an adult perspective, I could really like feel into my gut and it didn't feel good.
Mhm.
And
Right.
not that I witnessed things that were like severe, but it was just the overall energy of the animals were just highly stressed. So, and around that time, my grandparents did relocate, so therefore horses were just poof out of my regular visiting, and so I got into sports. I got into playing basketball, and that kind of took me on a trajectory. I was blessed to be a natural athlete, and I went to the Junior Olympics and really spent a lot of time honing that skill and went to college and did that experience for some time, but there was still something missing. Um, and I didn't actually at that time realize that it was horses because I worked actually in the restaurant industry for a really long time. And the one main skill that I got from working in the back of the house, in the kitchen, to the front of the house, and working with the clients was to be able to deal with a high level of stress and a high level of unpredictability. And I guess on a certain level, we talk about within horse speak this thing called zero, which is inner calm. And I wouldn't say I just learned how to manage the stress because that was my day in, day out. I didn't realize that it was this stress on stress and that I wasn't really helping my body let go of that stress. So that was a really interesting thing that I've been able to cultivate into the work with the horses now, is to really feel when there is some stress, whether it's my own stress or from another animal, to be like, how can I help you de-escalate? So I jumped a little bit fast forward to present, but regardless, I then didn't realize I was missing horses. So a friend brought me to a rescue. And as soon as I stepped foot on that rescue land, I was like, yes, I'm at home. And soon after that, I did meet Sharon. And luckily, I did because I had rescued a PMU filly, and she was about 8 months old at the time. And her name is Jag. And everything was great until she turned about 2, when it just came down to the point of like, love isn't enough. Like, kind of with a dog and a cat, you can get away with just loving the animal, and usually it's okay. But with a horse, it was a completely different experience. And I knew from watching other folks working with horses, I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And so, therefore, with Sharon showing up and teaching some clinics there, I was like, well, I was hooked by what she was teaching. So, with that little bit fast forward, we ended up becoming really good friends, and we then cultivated a relationship. And so Sharon's like, I really want to write a book. And I said, that is a fantastic idea. And so we did research publishers and find out which publisher we could just send a book submission to. And we found Trafalgar. And we lived in Vermont at the time, and Trafalgar was only 1 hour north of us, which was great because they're like, they read our submission, they're like, who are you people? And so we were, because we didn't have any kind of social media presence. We're just kind of like a couple gals in Vermont hanging out with horses, learning some really cool things. And so they let us go up and do a demonstration, and they were hooked. They were like, yes, we're going to write, sign a deal with you and you can write your book. So that was really great. That was like around 2014. So I just feel really blessed to have met Sharon at that time, and that she could have, at the baseline, help me with my horse, because I was completely lost. And now I'm, here in 2014, 10 years later, I'm working with horses from all over the world. So, and a lot of them are these high-headed horses, like I witnessed at the thoroughbred track, and I can show up and be like, I'm here. I've got you. I'm your safety, and I'm going to help you de-escalate. So then we could actually do some cool activities together. So it's been just an amazing mission, to be here and to be on this podcast and helping people understand their horses better. Because I do see that there's a lot of different misunderstandings about horses in the industry, and we are looking to help you to see horses from their perspective, because their perspective is not ours. They are a prey animal and we are a predator. So the more that we can see, like, aha, you're worried about the environment more often than we are, I can help you feel safer. And so I just, I'm looking forward to helping everybody be able to learn as much as they can glean during this podcast. So, PJ, I also have another question for you.
I want to say, Laura, just thank you
Oh,
for sharing your journey of how the evolution of horse speak got to, its solid beginnings. And to also thank you and Sharon for all the work that you have put into uh observing, and all the work that it takes to spend time observing, decode what happened, just filter through thousands of hours of video, seeing what happened before so that you can understand better the behaviors or the body language markers that you're seeing in videos. And also that you're putting it out in the world, because I really truly feel, and I see it through the people that I know are also on this journey of learning nonverbal equine body language through horse speak, is that it's really changing the relationship. It's changing the way people are seeing equines. It's changing the way equines can see people, and that a different companionship can be formed rather than we using them as tools. A lot of horses like to have a job, but within that job, if we can have better communication, the whole outcomes are better and they're safer. And that's what you two are putting out there, and helping us understand that yes, horses are a prey species. They're a prey animal, but they have such social skills and social order within their herds, and they are a social species much like humans. And if we can kind of pay attention to that part of working with them and seeing them and being with them and using our I don't want to exactly say tools, but the body language skills that you and Sharon teach out, if we can start to do that from the horse's perspective, everything does change. And so I just want to thank you for bringing all this to the humans and the horses on the planet.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for seeing us because, yeah, it's been our life since the book came out is completely different. Um, I have been fortunate on a personal way of, switching professions completely away from the hospitality industry. And now I'm a business owner. And so that has been so liberating in itself, that here I am. I didn't have a dream of owning a business, and now it just has all evolved. And that's been such a gift of how the horses have come together through Sharon. Because with that being said, I'm going to introduce Sharon Wilsie, as she is our teacher and mentor, and she is also a lifelong horse enthusiast. So Sharon didn't have a traditional school life like most of us. She did miss a lot of school because of health complications. So when she wasn't at school, she was with her mom, who was a vet tech at one of the local veterinarian hospitals. And Sharon got to basically be with animals every day, all day. And a lot of the animals she did spend time with were in somewhat of distress because they were there because they were unhealthy. So she would clean cages and hold them and be with them and just really learn what it's like to hold an animal in distress. And as time went on and more medications became available to help her with her allergies as well as asthma, because she was also highly allergic to horses, she was able to start riding. And during that time, she did have a great teacher. And this gal went to the Spanish riding school when Sharon, I think, was around 16 ish, and came home from being out the Spanish riding school and said, "We're changing everything. We're starting over." And there was a whole new bag of tricks that this gal had introduced to Sharon. So, similar to PJ, Sharon also then had to put a pause in her horse lifestyle because of life. And she did take about 20 years off from horses too. And with that time off, she just loved them and wanted to be their voice. And what ended up happening is that she did acquire a couple of her own horses in her backyard. One, it was Dakota, and the second one was Rocky, who was a Tarpon. And at the time when she brought the Tarpon home, she didn't know that he was actually one of the prehistoric wild breeds from Germany. He was just like, bought from one of the local folks in the area for a kid's pony. And this horse went from home to home to home because he really wasn't a kid's pony, because he had his own opinions, because he, again, was a wild breed. And there was a big misunderstanding of what he needed to be heard. So with him and Dakota, who was an Appaloosa with some racing stock in her background, she liked to rear. And so there's this fiery energy with this horse. And Sharon's like, how can I help her get down onto all 4 feet and not take her dignity away? So with Sharon being going to the rescue, like I mentioned from my story, and also she was able to work with students who were at Landmark College, which is a college that specializes in students on the autism spectrum as well as different learning disabilities. So therefore, these kids were like the perfect students because they asked really good questions. And at the time, she didn't have all these nuances that we've now come up with horse speak. This was the ground floor, because these kids were like, I don't want to use a whip. I understand safety, but I don't want to drive a horse away from me if I feel like it's getting too close. And there was all these really cool scenarios that Sharon was like, okay, well, let's make this our mission of how can we build a relationship with a horse with no treats and just us. So she worked there for 8 years. She went to the rescue, and then also because of the rescue, acquired a bunch more horses. And one horse that she had rescued, big surprise, no one knew that her name at the time was Faye. Now it's Mummy because she was pregnant. And so they had basically a nice little family system with the mama and the baby, an auntie, couple aunties. So Sharon was able to have a local farmer give her permission to navigate the horses through the woods and then out into a grazing field. And so then this is where Sharon just took her observation skills to the next level, because she's like, there has to be a way to understand horses from their perspective. How are they communicating their wants, needs, and desires using their body? So that's really the deep dive that she took. Was like she forgot everything she had learned from all the books and DVDs that she had learned throughout the time that when she first got Rocky and Dakota, because she's like, I can't learn from people about horses. I really need to learn from them. And the cool thing that I am so grateful for, that she has this beautiful gift of having a photographic memory. So then she was really able to hone in on all these details and link and layer all these cool nuances that the horses were doing with each other. So when I met her, I'm like, you're brilliant. Let's do this book thing. And she's like, okay. And she can just, it's amazing to see her create a book and how she will like type 50,000 words and then she'll erase the whole thing. And I'm like, oh my God, like I can't even imagine erasing that. But that's her. And over the years now, I have just let that go, that it's her process, that she just has to delete everything and start with a fresh page. So, I put out a ton of thanks for Sharon, because she, her dedication to the horses and learning about horses, but also to the other aspect of her world was her dedication to learning about herself. With all of this, she did a lot of different mind-body integration work through dance, through Tai Chi, through different therapies. So she really took a deep dive into understanding herself and understanding how her nervous system was fluctuating with another nervous system, and how we could come together and have a cohesive way. But it was through a lot of practice for herself. And that's another cool thing that we're able to help people with, is to get to know your body a little bit better. I mean, we're not doing therapy, but we are doing a way to get to know, like, if you walk into a room and your belly sinks and you feel nervous all of a sudden, to notice that and be like, wow, that was interesting. What just happened? So I think one of the beautiful things that HorseSpeak has brought to myself, and I think to other students too, is to have that how interesting attitude about different scenarios.
Yeah, I agree with you, Laura. I think one of the things that is important to horses' feeling of safety and protection is our own awareness of how we are. And humans have this very go-to way of being, to put on a face, really, to say we are fine, or uh, we are a certain way when we're actually not. And that feels very incongruent to a horse. It creates confusion. It creates lack of clarity. And I've noticed, and as we go through these podcasts, I'm sure that we will have a lot of stories to share. But I have noticed horses bringing awareness to people. They will put their muzzle or forehead on a person's chest in an indication, as they would with another horse, of how are you? How are you feeling? How are you really? It's very soft. It's very nurturing. I've witnessed horses over and over again, my own and of your horses and other horses, bringing awareness to people's feet or ankles or
Mhm.
knee. And when you say to the person, "How is your foot or ankle or knee?" they invariably will say something. I just broke my ankle, or I had a knee replacement 3 weeks ago, or something. And the horses seem to really be aware of things that we are pretending aren't happening in the moment.
Mhm.
And when we can just be mindful of that and have some self-awareness, we don't have to fix it, we don't have to pretend it isn't happening. Just say, yes, I broke my ankle last week. Your note, you seem to be noticing that. I notice it too. And then we can move on with the conversation with the horse after we have had some awareness and feel more congruent to them.
Yeah. It is that happens over and over again. When we were in Germany a couple weeks ago, that happened. And there was this a moment where this gal was standing next to the horse, it was a mare, at her shoulder, and then the horse actually went and sniffed her left knee and right shoulder. And Sharon's like, "How interesting that the horse just out of the blue just came and sniffed you as you're just sharing space with her."
Mhm,
And the comment was, "How are you? How
mhm,
is your knee and shoulder?" And the gal said, "Yeah, I've actually been having some problems with these joints." And
uh-huh.
okay, like that's the thing that's so neat about what we're observing with the horses is that they're so precise. And there's nothing that happens by accident. And I think too, which is neat, is through my personal journey of learning this and being with so many different horses, is when a horse is doing something, it's in relationship to myself. And I might get an answer that I didn't really expect, or I was like, that might have been on the spectrum of a little bit negative answer. And it's like, did I do something that could have influenced the horse to have maybe stepped into my personal space? Was there something I was missing? And that is the thing that I love, is that I can look at myself and be like, and not take it personal and be like, oh, you're telling me that my foot turned this way, blocked your front movement. And so you basically hit your hoof to my shoe. Be like, hey, this thing is in the way. Can you move it, please? So it's like not taking their responses offensively. Like I'm not like, "Oh my gosh, Jag, you just hurt my feelings," right? Like, "Oh, you told me my foot was in the wrong position." That's a really good thing to know. So next time I can practice not having my foot accidentally stop turned outward into your lane. I got it. Thank you for that answer. I think, learning having them as a mediator versus a person telling you like you're doing a wrong thing, it's a little bit easier to take that constructive criticism sometimes.
And to know that where they're coming from is all, again, it's all about safety and being able to be move together.
Yeah. And
If our
clarity.
yes, in clarity of understanding, having awareness of how we're standing. If our feet are pointed different directions, then we're not set up physically to run quickly should we need to. So we need to
Yeah.
talk about practicing keeping our feet pointing in the same direction, right? If we're
Yeah.
have our body angled across their core, their chest, but we're asking them to move forward, well, that's incongruent to them. You're saying two different things. So be clear about what it is that we're saying with our body language. And from the beginnings of your clinics, the books that Sharon has written and you have facilitated the writing of, and the Horse Speak Academy, which is the online learning platform for either a 3 month dive or a 12-month dive. Through all of this, what we are learning is why things are important to the horse from their perspective. It's their nonverbal language system, and we are learning to emulate their language system, which provides for clarity from the beginning. We're not asking them to uh, learn cues, figure out what we mean by something, setting them up for success and helping them find it. is a very soft way for them to learn. But if we can make that more direct communication by saying things to them in their own nonverbal language, by learning to emulate that with our bodies and our breath and our intention and the angles at which we're standing according to the angles of their body, everything just gets much clearer, much quicker, and then we can move on to having doing different things with our horse, and understanding horse speak as um, precise equine body language skills doesn't it does not matter what discipline or whether you're doing a discipline with your horse. You can be
Absolutely.
dressage, you can be reining, you can be
Mhm.
trail riding, you can be backyard pony like mine are right now. And pretty much what we do is we just we do horse speak together. We have conversations.
Talk. Yeah.
I don't do any big competition or show riding with them, but you can. And
Yes.
it's not about the discipline or what you're doing with your horse. It's about how you're doing
Mhm.
whatever it is you're doing with your horse.
Yeah, and you bring up such a great point because this what we're learning with the pebbles. Came up with this acronym over the years where, the word horse speak is a little bit vague. And get some responses about like, oh, well, I do talk to my horse, or I do get psychic readings from a reader or what have you. And it's like, no, it's pebbles, precise equine body language skills. This is based on observation of repeatable patterns that horses are doing with each other and that we can emulate it. That's the coolest thing. Like, we can seriously do these gestures, postures, and signals with them, even though we only have two hands and 2 feet. So it's for enhancing anything that you're doing with your horse. It, like PJ said, it doesn't matter the discipline you're doing. This is a way to understand them. And like, there's this vision I can't get out of my head since the beginning we started this recording. And it's a little bit advanced for some of our listeners, maybe, but um, Rocky last night was so cute at the gate because he has an internal clock and he says it's time for Rocky to have his dinner. And I'm sure most of you who have a horse, they also have a similar clock. And the thing that I thought was so cute, because he's still a little bit furry from the winter time, so he's just got this all this fur, and he's just standing there like, hey. But what he was doing was he turned his neck to the left, and then I could see that what we call in horse speak is a twiggle, which is a twitch wiggle of the skin at his shoulder. And the shoulder button, one of the meanings is buddy. And he's like, hey, buddy, come over here and give me some food. Let Rocky out of the gate. And it was just funny because it's like he didn't do it once, he did it twice. He's like, buddy, I'm here. I'm at the gate. You know what that means. Let me out. And I just start laughing at him because I'm like, hey, buddy, I know you're hungry and I'm going to get on it and get you your food. So it's like these little things, even walking between a couple horses, walking by the button that you can see, it's kind of like right by my ear on the other side. Over here is we call it the yield button. And we also call that the button of don't be defensive. So if I'm walking between, I'm just have my sled and I have some hay and I'm walking between a couple horses, I put my palms out and just be like, hey, don't be defensive as I walk by, to just let them know I'm coming through. Let's keep your legs there as I walk through. And so it's just become such second nature and purposeful when you can embody this language, because it's so neat to see horses, they go to these same buttons of communication with each other for different reasons. And so when you start learning, it's it blows my mind still after all this time and all these hours of watching horses. There's never a dull moment.
Absolutely. And you're reminding me of something that one of our students in the Horse Speak Academy mentioned a couple of months ago. she was surprised, as I said, sometimes when we start practicing this and the horse sees us emulate well enough that they recognize that we're trying to emulate and talk with them in their own language, we get very excited. We're surprised. Maybe we
Yeah,
shouldn't be, but we are. And she said, I this stuff really does work. And Laura and I say this to each other all the time.
all
There
the
are
time.
times where I'll call her and I'll say, this thing happened with my horses, and my mare was running around the paddock because a motorcycle just went by, and I was able to offer her breath messages, the feel in my own body, some gestures, postures, and signals about returning to calm. And it worked. This stuff really works. And what our academy student said was that, I began feeling that this stuff, this learning of this nonverbal body language really does work. And when I listened to my horse, I saw my horse, I felt my horse get calmer and really start paying more attention and um, be with me in the moments that I was trying to communicate with her through the body language. She said, I really understood from my horse that it doesn't just work, it's true.
Mm.
And it works from our perspective because it's true from the horse's perspective. It's their language system. And the magic, if you will, which is not magic, and something I wanted to say about when Laura was talking earlier about how, we start to change and how we feel and how we are aware. The horses bring that as an important part of learning their body language, their nonverbal language, because um, we need to be present with them, because that's how we can see them better. That's how we
Mm.
can really start to express and understand things from their perspective, is if we have a focused calm within ourself, which I know Laura will touch on in another podcast, but the concept of zero, right? Just being, it's not, zero is not nothing. It's not zero, nothing.
Sharon always said, "Zero is not zombie."
Zero is not zombie. Zero is not nothing. It's not without. It's not empty. It's actually being really present. And that's an important thing that comes through when we're um, being with our horses and really trying to emulate their nonverbal body language. And that's what our student was trying to bring through, is that it works from our perspective because it's true from their perspective. It's their language.
Yeah. And you bring up a great point too, of sometimes depending on what is going on in a horse human relationship, we call it relationship soup. And there's all different kinds of things that got thrown into the soup. And the word presence and learning a new thing can sometimes not go together because there's so much built up tension, perhaps, in the relationship that you're really, and this could be a complicated horse, and you can't, like, you feel like you lose your calm, your zero, and then the horse is not zero, and then things might not work out as textbook conversation. So sometimes we do suggest, and when we do teach in-person clinics, we typically ask students to please not bring their horse, so then they can have a neutral experience with a horse who lives on the property. So then the horse isn't having a change of environment, which then brings a whole other kettle of fish to the conversation. And so then working with a neutral horse and learning these gestures, postures, and signals with a horse you met for the first time, that's, can be also a layer that can help you with understanding this language in a different way. And we do hear it often, right? Like people who are like, I had to go work with my friend's horse to be able, like, oh my gosh, this stuff is working so well. But they had such a positive experience with their friend's horse that they could bring back those skills with their horse. Because sometimes, we say that horses could be kind of brought through the foster care system because they have gone from owner to owner to owner, and then they have all those experiences and there's so much inconsistency in their life, and sometimes we need to rehabilitate a horse so therefore they can be a good horse citizen. And it might not be because you rescued a horse from a rescue. It might be just you bought a horse and you might have paid really good money for it, and you're taken home, it's like, oh, this isn't the horse I met. And so then there's a lot of things that we can help enrich you to learn. So therefore, you can show up as a rehabilitator to help your horse gain better social skills, gain some more zero internally for themselves, so that you and this horse can have a really great time. So I'm loving this communication with you, PJ. And it's this, I love your enthusiasm about the different things that are going on for you with your horses, for yourself, as well as your different people that you've talked to. I was just wondering, how has horse speak affected your life? And if you don't mind sharing a little bit about yourself in your personal life as well with the horses.
So if I think back, Laura, to how horse speak has affected my life, I guess both personally and with horses, my thoughts go immediately back to 2020. We had just started the pilot certification program, and COVID happened, and you and
Surprise!
Sharon were having to learn how to teach our group via Zoom. We really had
Yeah,
to put this onto an online learning platform, which I guess was a blessing in disguise because you learned how to do that.
absolutely.
And now we have the Horse Speak Academy and a lot of Zoom type meetings, and
Yep.
it's working well to reach people all over the world. Um, but also during that time, what happened in our veterinary practice, as again I mentioned earlier, we had a referral diagnostic practice where we specialized in cardiology and internal medicine. So a lot of our day was doing ultrasound um, procedures, the scans on our patients, and we really didn't use any sedation. We tried not to, and only in most necessary cases. So the patients were being held for their ultrasound scans, and when I say held, I don't mean jokingly duct tape and rope. I mean
Gripped.
held held in the other definition of truly being held. They weren't being held down, they were being supported through the time where they had to be lying on a table and have an ultrasound, which is not an uncomfortable experience, but it's something different from their norm, and therefore, it can create some anxiety. But I learned to practice what we were learning in our pilot certification program for horse speak, in being aware of my own body, being aware of my breathing, being aware of having a focused calm, and being a grounding rod, as you say sometimes, for that other being. And so being held became supporting that animal's body, but also kind of supporting that animal's nervous system in regulation. And what I began to experience was, because we were, again, because of COVID, we didn't have the owners come in with their pets for their ultrasound. We were doing that without owners present. And I noticed a big shift in how
Mm,
the patients were. I think oftentimes humans' emotional dysregulation feeds the animal's emotional dysregulation. The animal gets concerned and protective because his owner now feels stressed to him, and he might not understand why. And as what happens when we want to calm another being, but we're not calm, we'll say things like, "Oh, you're fine, you're okay, you're okay."
yeah.
And the petting of that animal would become not soothing, but
Mhm.
agitating.
Yeah,
You
more
know, like,
frantic.
yeah, more frantic petting. And
Mm,
so what I was able to observe and also have an effect on was being the opposite of that for the patient in my hands, being held and supported. And again, practicing our breathing techniques that we had practiced to be grounded in our horse speak lessons, really being mindful of that animal's feeling of anxiety in my hands. And when the animal would feel a little bit more anxious to me, I would really add just soft energy back to the animal through my hands. And again, this, even though I was practicing this with animals other than horses, it's the same thing. We
mm.
have that same grounded feel in our body. We practice our breath to stay centered. We offer a certain feel through our palm on the horse, or energy of the palm near the horse. And practicing that feel for myself really changed my understanding of just how important that is.
Mm.
And so when I go to horses, I try to be mindful of how they are, what can I observe in their upright body posture or their ear angle or the tension that I might notice in some musculature. Um, it, it really did help to not just make my eye more keen and observing, but it helped to make my whole body more observant of how that other animal is next to me, not just what they look like. I'm able to better see them. And the interesting thing about that is it really does transfer to other humans. I think I'm better able to see underneath like the outside layers of what a person might be presenting of how they are. And I really start to get a sense of really how they are.
Mm.
And, we talk about sometimes we use having coffee with a friend analogy, but, when you have coffee with a friend and you haven't seen them in a little while and you say, "How are you?" And they go, and
Fine.
notice that their voice is higher. They might not be breathing so well
Yeah.
when saying their words, and their shoulders come up, and their belly might look tighter. Their feet get tighter. They grab the ground with their floor. I'm able to pick up more
You're like,
information.
how interesting.
How interesting that that would happen, and so it gives me a sense of, okay, well, maybe, I need to not talk to this person. I might need to just listen today. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing with our horses, right? It's we notice, how they do things. It's not just if they come into us for a greeting, it's how did they greet? It's the quality of what they're saying, not just what they're saying. And it gives us a better overall sense of walking through this world and just being with our friends, our dogs, our horses. And I think that's probably the biggest way that learning nonverbal body language skills, precise equine body language skills through horse speak has affected me with horses and other places in my life. I'm a
Yeah.
good
And
listener.
I love it. And absolutely, it's just such a neat thing. The one thing that kept going over in my mind as you're telling this beautiful experience is how, hey, horse, how are you today? You mentioned about your friend, and, we do have, yeah, I'm fine, not bad, all these answers. And it's like the horse also has that kind of response too. It's like, yes, I'm doing well today. We had a nice night. There's no raccoons or anything came into the paddock or what have you. So taking into account that your horse be like, hey, horse, how are you today? And that's, I think, one of the big things that we have our students realize is that the horse is in their own experience. And when we show up, the horse might not be ready to then, oh, you're here, fine. I'll just drop what I was doing with my friends. We were just hanging out watching the game, and go with you. So it's a neat thing to realize that we are in conversation and that we are interrupting them and being like, hey, I'm going to join you for a little bit of your lunch. It's one thing that we love to do is go out to eat with each other or share a meal, and showing up and saying, hey, horse, I'm going to, offer to share a meal with you for a little while, and then you can come with me. And so then we're just like sharing the space with them like we would with a friend out
Right.
for a coffee. And if I think about this question for myself, I mean, I similarly feel the same, have like a similar how it has affected me too, is I feel like I'm a better person. Just overall. I'm a better listener, I'm a better like observer. Again, like you mentioned, is noticing they say I'm fine, and they do all these little nuances subconsciously, because everything does mean something. We did learn body language. We did matching and mirroring with our parents when we were little, and we learned from their body language on how to move. And so we had all this body awareness as a little one to learn how to balance for the first time and things. And then the verbal totally took over. And so I've, the other thing that is an ongoing practice is also just being a little bit slower because of my basketball and all the athletic stuff I did, and also the restaurant industry. experiences. Like everything was on fire in the restaurant, right? So it was like it took a while for me to like settle down, because it's like I have to do these things and this horse is doing that and that. It was just like I don't even recognize the person I was previous to really diving deep into this journey of horse speak and how it's changed my body and my mind. And like I'm so much clearer in every aspect of my life. And I'm like this showing up and being in the present moment.
Yeah,
And
I
I
really
have,
think that
go
it
ahead.
helps us to be more intentional and more deliberate in everything that we do. It starts to
Yeah.
just change, that even if we are intentional and deliberate, we learn the nuances of why it's important from the horse's perspective to be that way, and and we start to model that in all areas of our life. It just becomes more of who we are.
Yeah. And so, PJ, I want to thank you for spending the time with me today. And I want to thank our listeners for being out there. And we invite you to imagine that you could have the tools to resolve any challenges that you might be having with your horse, or enhance some really cool stuff you're already doing from their perspective, just understanding them for who they are, and from as a species as well as an individual. And by understanding precise communication, that will create a mutually consistent, safe, and enduring relationship. So we invite you to carry on with this journey with us as we continue to create more podcasts. We're going to be discussing a little bit more about what is horse speak. We're going to talk about zero. We're going to talk about all different topics of the book Horse Speak, the Equine Human Translation Guide, or the Horses in Translation, or Essential Horse Speak. So you can check out our website at sharonwilsie.com, or you can jump just right over to our online learning platform, horsespeakacademy.com. Find us on Facebook, subscribe to Sharon Wilsie on YouTube. So there's many different ways that we would love to create a deeper understanding of horses, horse speak, and getting to maybe know yourself a little bit better. So thanks for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Laura.
You're welcome, PJ. Thank you.